when you took wetlands from me, whoever that might be.
I looked on campus and I couldn't find the lecture you posted last Monday.
Okay.
It's probably because he didn't post it.
No, I remember posting it.
Okay.
So, yeah, send me an email to remind me to find that. Yeah, because you're definitely gonna need that. You wanna see that one for sure. That's gonna have a lot of stuff on it. So, thanks.
Do you have this one posted?
This lecture?
Yes.
No. So, okay, now I just did that one because I posted it last week because I had failing appliances in my house. So, redox reactions. So these are kind of important. So properly, the name about these is oxidation reduction reactions. And this is the outline posted for this, an outline? Well, we can at least do that, can't we? Should be an outline posted. Okay, so this is gonna get fun.
Would it just be labeled wetlands outline? No, that was something else.
Let me see here. So. Got it, whatever. Okay. So. UTM portal. My name would help. Send me a message, thank you.
That's the first time we want to delete when I graduate.
What do you?
Do a push.
I like when it doesn't send you the notification, you have to go into the app to press approve.
Every time it sends me the notification, it doesn't load through anymore. I have to go through the app anyways.
Limno, lecture outlines. Okay, so there's the lecture outline. Oh, recorded lectures. I see the problem. Yeah, that's been published. Well, having done all of that, there is an outline on here for Redox. Crap.
Bad.
Anyway, so back to where
We'll just
we
have to
were.
write really quickly.
No, I'll talk very slowly.
That's a good one.
Okay, sorry again. So redox reaction. Come on. There it is. Okay. So again, a lot of this I hope is just so second nature to all of you, because we've had it all before. Either chemistry or my classes here. So redox, also it's actually known as oxidation reduction reaction, or the ox-red doesn't sound too good, so they call it redox. And all it is any reaction where you basically are moving an electron from one atom to another atom. That's all there is to it. And so needless to say, they're very, very common. So one of the major type of reactions that exist. Just to explain this, so we're looking at the movement of electrons, which is the main thing. And so the trouble with redox, reduction, and oxidation is the terms are counterintuitive. So when you move an electron from one, if you move an electron away from an atom, so it loses an electron, that's called oxidation. Losing an electron is oxidation. Gaining an electron is reduction. And that's the part that confuses people. Because we think you're adding an electron, you're gaining, but you're actually lowering, you're reducing the charge. The charge is getting lower, so that's why it got these names. So these names predate any sort of wisdom in the world. So how do we, people in my world, remember this? People who can't remember stuff all the time, we remember oil rig. And that helps. So oxidation is loss. Reduction is gain. How do you remember that? Okay, and again, we're talking about electrons. So when you oxidize, you lose an electron. When you reduce, you gain an electron. Okay. Why care about them? Well, of course, as I say, most chemical reactions involve redox somewhere going on inside the reaction. More importantly, this talk I'm aiming the sort of aquatic habitats I'm primarily talking about are going to be wetlands, because that's where these are very, very important. These determine what's happening in wetlands. So in any of the critical natural reactions, the things that happen in any sort of aquatic systems, but specifically in wetlands, is their redox. So photosynthesis is a redox reaction. Aerobic respiration is a redox reaction, as is anaerobic respiration. And each one of these is not one simple reaction. They are a whole series of redox reactions going on. And you are, in your metabolism, in the metabolism of all living things, you do redox. So hopefully I've made my point. So that's all living things, and just for those who keeping up, this is a list of every living thing on the face of the earth. It's either an archaea, a bacteria, a protist, a plant, a fungi, and an animal. You have to be, if you're not one of those, you're not alive. Which one of those is viruses? None of them, because viruses are not alive. So, yeah, so these are the things that living things have the 7 characteristics of life. And metabolism is one of the characteristics of life, and redox is a major point of metabolism. So, having said that, when it comes to redox reactions, bacteria, the redox reactions of bacteria are what they're doing are very, very important in aquatic systems. They're going to be changing all sorts of things that are going on in those systems here. So when I talk about some of the tricks and things that happen in systems, and I'll be talking about nitrogen fixation, methanogenesis, and all these sort of things, are being done by bacteria. Okay, here is the world's simplest redox reaction. Atom A, atom B. Atom A loses an electron, gives it to atom B. I did the graphic work myself on that, just to let you know.
Good job.
Thank you. Okay. So there's the world's simplest reaction. So atom A was oxidized. Atom B was reduced. Oxidized, atom B has been reduced. That's it. Okay. So that's basically it. Now let's do a real one using a very, very simple redox reaction. Okay. And if I take sodium plus chlorine, I get sodium chloride, table salt. But that shows you nothing in that picture here. There's actually 2 reactions are going on in that picture. Okay. Really, what happened to do this is, first of all, sodium lost an electron. In other words, sodium was oxidized, and it became sodium ion. And that's a cation. At the same time, chlorine gained an electron, so it was reduced and became the chloride ion, which is an anion. So, needless to say, since one is positive and the other one is now negative, they're attracted together, they click like magnets, and they form a bond. So, really, again, and I'll get to this whole reaction is made up of two reactions. And half of a whole is a half, so it's made up of what do we call two half reactions going on. Okay. So this is writing it as half reaction. Sodium becomes sodium cation plus an electron. Chlorine plus an electron become the sodium anion, or the calcium, the chlorine anion. Because we're going to be focusing on half reactions. Okay, some more confusing terminology now because that was so much fun. Okay. Sodium, as I said, since this is oxidation, it's losing electron oil. Okay. Sodium is being oxidized, so therefore it's a reducer. And chlorine is being reduced, so therefore it's an oxidizer. So anything that takes on an electron is an oxidizer. That's going to be an important term. Things that oxidize take electrons from someone else. In the process, they are being reduced. Anything, and there's my big words there. Anything that takes up electrons is an oxidizer. Okay. So what does the word oxidizer sound like?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. And that's not by chance. When it comes to oxidizers, the queen mother of all oxidizers, the best of the best, is oxygen. Okay. So there's a reason for that. Okay. So, I'm going to give you 6 half reactions. Okay. Why these 6? They are all biologically important. All important in weapon systems. Okay. So basically here, I'm going to be showing you oxidizers. So, stealers of electrons. So the first. And these are half reactions I'm showing you going on here. The first reaction, which happens, and these aren't in any particular order, I'll talk about order. Well, I guess they kind of are. The first ones are kind of weedy. Okay. The first one is known as methane generation. What is methane? Anybody know?
Yes.
CH4.
CH4, right. It's a very simple, it's the world's most simplest organic compound. Okay? Organic compound is any compound that contains carbon and hydrogen. Methane contains carbon and hydrogen. That's it. 1 carbon, 4 hydrogens, and that's it. Methane. Okay. What happens in this reaction is this is carbonate. Okay. And carbonate is an oxidizer. And what happens is the carbonate picks up electrons and forms methane. So, now what else do we know about methane?
Smells.
It has no smell whatsoever. No smell whatsoever. That's a misnomer. It's usually when you see methane, it's being generated with other gases such as cadaverine and putrescine, which guess what? Something about putrescine has a smell. I'll be darned. Cadaverine has a smell. That's what you're smelling. Okay. And hydrogen sulfide. But what is it? Is it liquid?
It's a gas.
It's a gas. Okay. So if I'm in a world where if I'm in an aquatic world, turning this out, this means this is a net loss of carbon. It's leaving the water. This is why these things should be important. Next one, sulfate reduction. Okay. Sulfate is an oxidizer. Sulfate, SO4. Okay. It's an oxidizer, picks up 8 electrons, and what does it do? It produces hydrogen sulfide gas and water. So again, hydrogen sulfide, this is a way that in a wetland system, do you remember, Caitlin, the nickname for wetlands? They're called the whats of the world. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
The kidneys of the world, yeah.
Cause it cleans everything out.
Because they clean, so yeah, so basically, so I have a water system with carbon in it, it's being lost. I have a water system with sulfur in it, it's being lost because of these half reactions. Next up, iron reduction. So iron can be an oxidizer, and so I think it's, which one's Fe3, ferric or ferrous? Fe+3 is ferric, right? You remember? Anybody? Chemistry? No clue. Okay. I think it's okay. So I think this is ferric. This is Fe+3. It oxidizes, and it is reduced to Fe+2, which I think is ferrous iron. In this case here, is this a gas? No. What it is, it's a cation. So cations dissolve well in water, and it can move that way.
Is, with the sulfate reduction, the sulfate is lost from the system like the carbon is?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So in fact, if you ever heard the term swamp gas, swamp gas is a mixture of methane and hydrogen sulfide. And sometimes and because it's got methane in it, methane it will actually ignite. And sometimes in swamp systems, you'll get this flash that'll occur. Scares the crap out of people. So similar to iron reduction is manganese reduction. And manganese, and this is manganese and manganic, I can't remember. So manganese dioxide, which is, I think it's basically +4, I think. But what does it do? It basically, again, it's an oxidizer. It grabs some electrons, and then it becomes the manganese ion. And again, these are ions in water, and I talked about ions before in water. I give you the principles of water. It means that they can move, and they do move. Denitrification. So nitrogen in water exists. The primary form of nitrogen, and this is in the lectures that you missed, I need to get up for you. Well, I did. I have opened it up for you. The nitrogen in water, it primarily exists as nitrate. Nitrate is an oxidizer. Okay, nitrate right here can pick up a whole mess of electrons, and when it does, it becomes elemental nitrogen, N2. Where do we find elemental nitrogen in the world? If you had to go get some, where would you go?
Soil.
Even closer.
Atmosphere.
Right in front of you. You're breathing it right now. It's the most common form of nitrogen, N2. So again, another loss of nitrogen from the system as a gas. Then, so that's 5. The last one then is oxygen depletion. Okay. So remember, as I said, the queen mother of all oxidizers is oxygen. So if you're oxidizing things, you're using up oxygen. So oxygen grabs some electrons, becomes water. So this is a critical step. If you don't remember, this is a critical step in photosynthesis. Right here, critical step in respiration. Okay. So this one here. Okay. Oxygen as an oxidizer is critically important.
Hang on.
So,
We don't have this outline, but I said we don't have this outline, I got
I'll see if I can find it somewhere, but I don't know where it would exist. Maybe the wetlands class, because it's somewhere around. I'll try to give you an outline. Okay. Alright, so, here we go. Here are those, methane sulfate, iron +3, manganese +4, nitrate, not oxygen. What do they have in common? They are all oxidizers. Okay, which we have been talking about here. Another way to say it, they, as an oxidizer, it means they accept electrons. That's their job. I'm an oxidizer, I take electrons so that I can be reduced. Oxidizers grab electrons. Okay. But, having said that, not they all, some are better at doing this than others. And so if you have certain oxidizers around, and they're good at doing this, they'll do it and the other ones won't. So basically, they run the system. Okay. So how do we measure how good of an oxidizer you are? And in other words, what is your potential of being a good oxidizer? Well, that's called the redox potential. And the symbol for redox potential is, I have no clue why, it's EH. Yeah, so I'm not sure where that comes from. But redox potential of something is EH. Okay. And so it's just a measure, how good are you at gaining electrons? Or how good are you at losing electrons? So, if you're able to gain electrons and you're good at it, you're a good oxidizer. If you lose electrons, real easy, you give them away fast, you're a good reducer. So with that in mind, I got two oxidizers. They're both present, both ready to oxidize things. What will happen? Well, the one that's the better oxidizer gets the electron. The other one doesn't. So the half reaction of the stronger oxidizer will occur. The half reaction, the other one won't change. So it'll just stay in its, basically, its state. It won't change states. Okay. So we can measure this. Because since what we got, all this is, again, what it comes down to is atom A giving an atom to atom B, an electron to atom B. That's movement, that's electricity. And you can measure electricity. So you can use a voltmeter to measure how strong, how good of an oxidizer something is. Okay. The unit of measure for EH is millivolts. It's thousandth of a volt. And so the larger the voltage, the more efficient the oxidizer. So with that in mind, I gave you these 6 aquatic half reactions. Methane, sulfate, manganese, iron, nitrogen, and oxygen. What are their strengths? Okay. Redox. So methane generation. Again, just remember that I said that this is the weenie one, it's a weenie one. So for carbonate to be converted to pick up enough to be reduced to be a good oxidizer and make methane, the strength of that reaction is negative 250 millivolts. So that's a very small number. You do not have to know these exact numbers. I do want you to know the relative strengths though to each other. Denitrification is next. Again, nitrates are oxidizers, so they're gonna accept electrons, go become elemental nitrogen. That one, 220 millivolts, a little stronger. Not much. So if I'm in a situation where I got nitrate and I got methane, and those are the only two things I've got there, nothing else, those are the only two oxidizers, denitrification is going to happen before before I start generating methane. Another term for generating methane is methanogenesis, because I use that term every so often. That's the way I learned it. Next up, manganese reduction, turning a manganese dioxide into this movable manganese cation, which can start sliding around in the wetlands. Okay, 200, negative 200 millivolts. A little bit better. Sulfate reduction, so this is generating hydrogen sulfide gas. For this to happen, 150 millivolts. So these numbers are getting bigger as we go. Iron reduction, again turning ferric iron into ferrous, reducing it down to ferrous iron. That's 150 also. And that leaves one reaction, oxygen depletion. For oxygen to do this, the strength of this reaction is greater than 400 millivolts. It's huge. Oxygen is the queen mother of this. This is why pretty much all of life needs oxygen, because of this step right here, which is critical. When you, in aerobic respiration, you end up, remember, you have the electron transport chain. When you get to the end of the electron transport chain, you've got to put the electrons somewhere. If you don't put them anywhere, the chain stops, and that really results in a condition called death. So if you've got oxygen there, you got these electrons that come through the chain, boom, you convert it into water, and all is well. So oxygen depletion. Oxygen, without a doubt, is the strongest oxidizer there is. Means it's the greatest attractor of electrons. So in other words, of those 5 reactions, okay, again, remember attractor electron, remember I showed you the water molecule. Water molecule is 2 hydrogens with an oxygen, but it's a polar molecule because oxygen keeps pulling the next electron over to it. Oxygen loves electrons. Okay. So basically when you have oxygen in water, it readily combines with electrons. It's always grabbing electrons. Okay? And so water has very low electron activity because they're basically all being bound up. Okay? And so if oxygen is using all the electrons, then they're not available for other reduction reactions. So this is a long way of saying if you've got oxygen present, those other 5 reactions I showed you are not going to happen. They do not exist. Methanogenesis doesn't exist. Sulfate reduction doesn't exist. Iron reduction, manganese reduction don't exist. Denitrification doesn't exist. Won't happen.
So in a way, if there's not enough oxygen, the other ones will occur, which is
Yes,
essentially a
the
bad thing.
The whole thing is tricky. What if I don't have enough oxygen? Once oxygen is gone, it's up for grabs. Now things can happen. And that's the beauty of wetland systems. Because they're wet, there's not much oxygen in them. So you change a whole set of rules. So this is how the world we know, our living world, works. Is we take a deep, as in the words of Taylor Swift, take a deep breath, baby. And that's what's happening here. We're getting plenty of oxygen. So why is it important to life? So this is basically, here's what, remember, energy for all living things, every last living thing. This is the unit of energy, ATP. Everybody remembers that. That all cellular functions, basically the energy you need, you take an ATP, snap off the P, and you make ADP, but that burst of energy can be used. And then of course you have to put it back together. So you take ATP, you knock off that T, and poof, there's metabolic energy. So everything else, you know, why do we have glucose? Glucose we use the energy from glucose to slap the P's back on. Okay, so we can burn them again. So everything goes to ATP. This is the basic currency of life. All living things use ATP. So as a result, it's critically important for all living things to generate ATP. How do you generate ATP? Again, it's the opposite of using ATP. You take basically ADP and P, and using some sort of energy source, you basically prime the molecule, it's ready to go, boom, you break it again, you release the energy you need, and so you keep, basically, they're showing here, you go from a dead battery to a charged battery by basically recharging it over and over again. So ATP plus some sort of energy source gives you ATP, and with the ATP I can then crack it off and get the metabolic energy I need. So, all cells have plenty of ATP, or ADP and P, okay? And what is the energy source then? How do they hammer those guys together? This is straight out of 140 all over again. Okay. And that's called the electron transport chain. So basically, electrons, and these electrons are following these yellow lines. They're being passed from molecule to molecule to molecule, coming down through here. In the process of passing them from molecule to molecule to molecule along this membrane, this is one side of the membrane, this is the other side of the membrane here. As they move down that chain, they're causing, the energy as they move down that chain is used to reach onto this side of the membrane, grab a hydrogen ion, and drag it to the other side. So, once, twice, 3 times. It keeps, so you're ending up, you're using electrical energy to make a chemical gradient. This side is becoming more and more negative because I'm pulling the H pluses out. This side is becoming more and more positive because I'm throwing them up there. Nature hates that sort of thing. Okay. These guys are dying to get back inside. The energy from the electron pass, that's electrical energy, is grabbing these hydrogen ions and throwing them out here and creates this gradient. They want to get back inside any possible way they can. They can't get through that membrane. But there is one place they can get through, a molecule called ATP synthase. It's got a little hole in it, if you will, and that little hole lets a hydrogen ion pass down. And so it comes screaming through that hole. And as it comes screaming through that hole, it's another source of energy that's then grabbing. Every time a hydrogen screams through that hole, it grabs an ATP and a P and makes ATP. So throwing them out here, letting them back in down here, it's like a hydroelectric plant. Instead of making electricity, it's making ATP. So the energy released is used to combine ADP and P into ATP. Okay. And that works just fine and dandy as long as this gradient is working. But if I get to the end here and the electron is just sitting there and has no place to go, the gradient stops. That ends that. This stops, the thing falls apart, everybody comes back in, and you basically, it no longer functions, and you have death. Okay. So we need somebody at the end that once that you're done with that electron to say, okay, that one's finished, I'll take it. So it has to be at the end of this, it has to be at the terminal of this electron path. It has to grab the electron, it has to accept it. So you need a terminal electron acceptor. Okay. To do that, if you are an acceptor of an electron, it means you're being reduced. In other words, you are an oxidizer. And as you cut to the chase, we all realize that for most living things, that terminal electron acceptor is oxygen. So what it's doing here is it basically grabs a couple hydrogens from the inside too, grabs a couple electrons coming down, and makes water. So this system's working great. Running electrons through here, throwing hydrogens out, grabbing the electrons when we're done, turning that into water. Okay, so now, and then what Caitlin was already all over was what about, let's think about the nature of the wetland aquatic systems, okay? They got high concentrations of organic matter, lots of dead plant material laying around inside of it, okay? What is that? Well, that's basically food if you are bacteria. Also food, yeah, so that's what they eat. They feed on this sort of stuff. They're breaking down, that decomposition, that's all what decomposition is, breaking down organic matter by bacteria. So they do this very well. Okay. And as they do this, their populations are growing. And of course, as their populations are growing, they're making ATP and using it. The bigger the population, the more ATP is needed by that population. And so it's being used and regenerated, which means you're sucking up oxygen like crazy. So the living system is putting a high BOD, there's that BOD we learned about it, a high biological oxygen demand, because you're burning this stuff up. You're turning all that oxygen that's in the system is going away, it's becoming water as the system runs. Okay. And that's why this is called the oxygen depletion reaction, because if you're doing this, you're definitely depleting oxygen. You're going to see a lot more about this when you go over to the sewage treatment plant next week while I'm in Nashville. So eventually what's going to happen is the system is going to run out of oxygen. Okay. Systems that are low in oxygen are called hypoxic. Systems without oxygen are called anoxic. Just to let you know. What happens then? Well, again, the terminal electron acceptor is no longer there. If you are an anaerobic organism, you are done. You shut down. I'm out of the game. I can't work anymore. All of a sudden, you're in a brand new world. Okay. There's still plenty of food out there. We have tons and tons of dead organic matter just waiting to be eaten, but no oxygen. Okay. So now, there are some bacteria that, well, don't have a problem with this. There are some bacteria that use other terminal electron acceptors. If you don't use oxygen, and use something else, you got a chance. All of a sudden, it's your world. Okay? And so what happens in wetland systems then? Okay. First, one of the things that happens is iron reduction. So these are bacteria that can use, so there's no oxygen around, but these are bacteria that use ferric iron as their oxidizer, terminal electron acceptor, and turn it into ferrous iron. Okay. So what happens is these systems start to build up in ferrous iron. Ferrous iron can move. Okay. Also, what color is iron? Gray. Is it? Or is it red?
Red.
The answer is yes. Both. The iron, when it's oxidized, is red. Iron, when it's reduced, is gray. Okay. Fe2 is a reduced iron. And so as a result, the soils and wetland systems are very gray in color. You don't see red in them because there's no oxygen. So when we think of iron rusting, that's iron that's oxidized, not reduced, and it tends to be red. So gray, if you look at someone who takes care of their shotgun, well, the shotgun is gray. It's not red. And so in wetland systems, remember you have the big three: soil, hydrophytes. We see you have hydric soils, hydrophytes, and hydrology. One of the things how you know you have a hydric soil is if the iron in the soil, if the soil is high in iron and the iron is gray, it's telling you you're in a wetland because of this. What else happens in the wetland? Sulfate reduction. It's going to be going on. Okay. And again, that's the production of hydrogen sulfide gases are now coming out. As the sulfate is functioning as an oxidizer, getting used up. And again, as I told you, what is that then? And it's, in a wetland system, that's one of the components of swamp gas. Oftentimes, if you've ever walked into a wetland system, or I don't know if you've ever have, I imagine Caitlin has, but you just sort of walk through that and your boots go down in the mud and you come up, you can smell all these, it smells like a swamp, huh? Next up, manganese reduction. What this is, what happens with manganese reduction is you're making another iron. Remember, what happened with the iron, the ferric iron, the ferrous iron in those systems, basically, it gave it a gray color. And one other thing about, I didn't mention before, I should though, what happens is that because they move in water, all the ferrous ions start to move together. Whatever, they sort of kind of move in the same direction. Same thing happens with manganese, not the very same direction as the iron, but they all get together, okay? And it gives it light spots. So, one indicator of soils, of hydric soils, are the grayness if you have lots of iron. If you have iron and manganese together, it's what we call mottled. You see areas of white, areas of gray, areas of white, areas of gray. And you see that, you say, this is a hydric soil. Even though it's not completely gray, it's a hydric soil because manganese is being reduced. Okay, what else could happen? Denitrification can happen in these systems. Denitrification, again, the production of nitrogen gas. We don't notice it because nitrogen gas is in the air, so this doesn't do much. But nitrate in the water is being converted into nitrogen gas. Okay. And again, I mentioned this, nitrogen is one of the, and again, this will be in the lecture that I did not give, I talked about this. Nitrogen is a major pollutant. Nitrates in systems, ammonia, nitrite, okay, are major pollutants. So water that once runs through a wetland is losing this major pollutant off it's going into the air. Last one then, methane generation. And of course, it's sort of like the hydrogen sulfide gas. You're producing methane gases are coming out. Again, they don't have an odor, but other things do. But they are a major component of swamp gases. There are a lot of places where you have anaerobic respiration going on, and you can get gas pockets, as I mentioned, building up underneath down underneath the soil, and these say pop out. You can have these plumes of methane which can catch fire, which is pretty cool. That's enough. That's enough on redox reactions.